Hello, I'm Scott. Welcome to a Maya tutorial. In this series we're going to be making a few simple prop meshes for in a game. We're going to learn how to build them, get them looking nice, and then export them in a game ready format. Today we're going to go over poly primitives and customize the viewport just a little bit and go through some of the really basic tools in Maya to get ourselves started. So the first thing in Maya that you're going to use for building any mesh is your poly primitive shapes, which you can find up here along the top left when you're in the poly modeling tab. So the main two that I find that you'll use is the poly cube here, and if we press W on the keyboard it gives us these little move tools, so we can shift this out the road for now. And the second most common one is the poly cylinder here, so we can move this around as well. Before we do any more, I'm going to go over here to the right hand side and I'm just going to change the layout of Maya just a little bit to make this more usable. Now, I have deleted all of my preferences, so I'm using the very basic version of Maya. Nothing's changed. I've not got any special settings or anything set up yet. If we go down on the right hand side here to where it says Attribute Editor, and we click on this, and then we right click on it, and we go to Tab Direction, and we set this to Top. This will move all our tabs up to the top here now, which makes them a little easier to find and a little less fidgety to click on. The only thing we need to do is go to the channel box and drag out a bit, and the modeling toolkit and drag it out a bit. Now that we've done that, if we go back to our attribute editor, we get a few more options to play around with our poly primitive shapes. So the two that you're going to be going for is the poly cylinder one, or similarly named but different is P cylinder 1, and then this is the same for the cube where it's P cube 1 and poly cube 1. If we go back to our cylinder though, well, we've got the mesh selected. If we go to poly cylinder 1, we get some options to change what the basic value of our poly primitives are. So we can't change these later on, it will break the mesh, so we have to use these settings right at the offset. So we can change the starting radius, or we can change the starting height, or the subdivision axis, which is, if I press Q just to get rid of the translate dongle there, if we press Q, subdivision axis is how many faces around the outside our cylinder is made up of. So if we drop this to 10, it halves it. We can even drop it lower, we can go to 6, we've now got a hex again, but if we put this back to the default 20, we get height subdivisions, which if I use my mouse wheel to scroll in and make this clearer, we can change how many times it divides our mesh on the height. And caps is how many rings around the top we get. We need to change these at the start because the minute we make an edit on the mesh, it doesn't know how to enact these changes on a mesh that isn't just a basic primitive cylinder. Our P cylinder 1, let's put this back to all the defaults, translate is your W key, which is moving on the X axis. You can see it changing here. When I drag it out, it changes the X, or the Z here, or the Y for up and down. And if we just use Control Z and get that back to 0, rotate is the E key on your keyboard, which is rotating your Y, rotating your Z, or rotating your X. And use Control Z, we'll get them back to 0. And scale is R on your keyboard, and you can scale again your X or your Z, or we can scale up and down the way with Y, or we can do two at once. So cylindrical objects, I find if you want to keep them cylindrical, it's better to use this little square here between the Z and the X, because it will keep it a cylindrical object, where using X on its own and then trying to do Z, you start to get this stretched shape. Anyway, delete that cylinder out and we'll go into here and we'll just quickly set our cube back to the center of the viewport, and we'll go to poly cube 1, and this lets us change the base width, the base height, the base depth, and then we can divide these sides one by one as well, similarly with the cylinder. If I pull these up, we can see the divisions coming in. The difference between changing depth here and scaling is if I set all of these to 5 and I go back into here, the scale of value of 1 is counting 5 as the base value. So scale is how many times this is being multiplied. So if we set this to 2, it is now 10 long rather than 5. Anyway, now that we've covered that, we'll delete that out, get a fresh polycube in, and we'll start modelling. So today we're going to model out a chest. We're going to make it just a really simple box model for, say, in a garage or a shed. So if we use our scale on the x-axis and we pull this shape out a bit and then make it a bit wider with the z and a bit deeper with the y. Now I don't like modelling halfway through the viewport like this, so I'm going to move the model up. So to do that we hit W, and if we hold X, that enacts point snap up here. No, sorry, grid snap. We can also just click this button on or click it off, but I find that when I click them on I forget that I have them on and I mess things up later. So if you hold the X key down and then move the model, it's going to snap to grid points like this. Now it's not snapping perfectly, so what we can do is we can move the point that the mesh snaps on, which is based on where the dongle's sitting, or pivot point as well. So if we press the D key, that lets us edit that. So while we've got D selected, it changes the dongle here in the middle. So if we use that, then we hold the V key, which is point snap up here, or we can just turn point snap on or off by clicking it, but again, hold V, click on the Y, and then with V held down, drag over a point on the mesh. So it's got to be a corner point or a vertex point. So if we drag to here and we let go, that's now snapped the pivot to the bottom of the mesh, which means when we use the grid snap, the mesh is going to snap to the grid based on the bottom middle. So if we tap D again, close the little pivot edit, and now we use X for our grid snap again, we can perfectly snap our mesh to the center there, and now it's sitting on top of the grid and we can see what we're doing a bit better. Now that we've got our basic shape in, we're going to want to add a division around the middle of our mesh, and then after that we're going to want to add the lock on the front and then smooth off the edges, and we're going to cover that in the next few videos. Thanks very much.